Hello, hello, and welcome to the Weeder Life podcast. I'm your host, Erica Weederlight, and I am the CEO and founder of We the Light. I help humans who feel inadequate, broken, self-conscious, and shamed around their sexuality to reclaim their aliveness, their power, and to have a renewed relationship to pleasure while preparing themselves to feel hella confident to date others and themselves. AKA, I'm guiding people to live their #best lives. I have to give you a fair warning. I do unfortunately swear like a drunken sailor, so if you do have little ones by you, just be sure to pop in some earbuds. All right, friends, let's buckle up and let's rock it to this week's episode. Oh my goodness. I am personally very stoked for this amazing conversation today. There's so much. I already want to just jump in and talk to our amazing guest. I'm like, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? So I am personally so stoked for this amazing episode. But before we get into the questions and the juice and the tips and the tricks and the tools, let's have a moment to introduce our fabulous next guest. Our next guest is someone that I've been watching from afar. We're in a similar community, and I have been like, this human is just rocking it out and just absolutely slaying the game. My guest is Dr. June Christian, and she created a life that she wanted, she desired, and she made it happen. And at reaching her own breaking point, and I'm sure she'll talk to us about this, Dr. June developed her own healing mechanism, which is the somatic method, which helps people anchor their mindset shifts, for quantum life changes in one of the greatest organisms on the planet. ... Our body. And her philosophy is, which I'm obsessed with this philosophy, is you can live your best life too, and releasing resistance is your next best step. Oh my gosh. Without further ado, hello.
Hello, Erica. I'm so happy to be here with you.
I am so happy you're here with us. There's so many things, like I said in the intro, that I want to talk to you about, I have questions about, but something that really there's a few things that attracted me to your work is, and we'll get into it, but I have to name this, is that you really live out loud. And I was stalking you the other day, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this person really claims their power and they take up space. And, you know, I know no one is perfect, but I'm just so impressed by you that you really, do the work and you are committed to living a life you love. And I really want to talk about that. But before we talk about that, I have to ask this, because it's like, I talk about this all the time, is I know my thing is pleasure. And then I've had a guest on recently, Marianne George, who is also an amazing human. And Marianne was saying, play. You know, we kind of bridged play and pleasure. And what I love what you do is satisfaction. And I'm like, oh. Because you know the deal. Sometimes people say play. Sometimes people say pleasure. Why I love Marianne was I say pleasure. More people can hear play. They're like, I could do play. And I think similar to Marianne, people can understand the idea of satisfaction more than pleasure. So can you talk to us about like what the fuck that even means? Like, what does it mean?
Absolutely.
And how do we start to embody that, live it, like, help if someone's like, I want satisfaction, like what do I even begin? Where does one begin?
So I would say that my definition of satisfaction is super easy. It's releasing resistance in the body. So it's, for so many of us, we think about satisfaction as when I get the job, when I get the partner, when I have the kid, when I buy the house, when I get the car, right? All of these things place satisfaction outside of our bodies, but really the warehouse for satisfaction is on the inside. If you can acclimate your emotions, your mental landscape, and your body, because your body has remembrances of joy and also remembrances of trauma, right? So if we can release that idea that we have to, anything, right? Have to lose the weight, have to get married, have to have the babies, have to get the job, right? If we can release that and we can settle into, this is my body, this is my experience, I can roll with whatever life is going to bring me because I'm happy in this moment. This moment is perfect because of its imperfections. And if we can release resistance to that, then change becomes the way, the vibrant way that we end up living our lives. So the house, the car, fill in the blank, that becomes icing on this, not even icing, right? Let's call it the fucking flowers on the cake, right? So you've got all of these processes, the mental landscape, your emotions, your body, those are the layers. And then satisfaction becomes the icing, right? Like that's what holds all of these things together. And then we have this great, amazing experience and all of these things that come to us. Those are the flowers and the flourish and all of those things.
Oh, that's so good. And I want to break this down, right? Because I'm sure people are, well, they're like, yes, 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 more. And it's like, how? For me, I just want to ask, because I'm sure like a huge component of this work is safety, correct? Like, I'm sure you have to feel, so can we talk about, we'll start with safety. And then I'm curious, like, how can we start to baby step live this work?
So I think that safety is incumbent upon I don't know if I would say incumbent. It's a part of the human experience, right? So the way
Yes.
what organizes how I do my work is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And the first one is basic needs, right? Like, are you feeding your body? Are you sleeping enough? Are you having sex? Right? Because we're mammals. And then that
Yes.
next level is safety. So not only are you physically safe, but are you also psychologically safe? And so while a part of our safety is dependent upon what's going on around us, we actually can become our own best home base, our own safest place. We get to inhabit that in our bodies. And so, yes, safety is definitely a piece of it. And there's no way that we can control the curveballs that life sends our way, right? Like, there's absolutely no way that we can say, let me back up. And what we also do is then we try to control it. And the way that we try to control it more oftentimes than not is through habituation. So I'm going to create these habits. I'm going to go to work a certain way. I'm going to go to the grocery store on a certain day. I'm going to eat these foods. I'm going to eat at this time, right? Like that's our way of clinging to safety. And I'm not saying it's wrong. However, there can be a false notion around safety because when that habituation gets interrupted, what happens? The world goes to shit, right? It's like, oh my goodness, these things, all of these things that I was expecting, it throws us not only for a loop, but we end up in a tailspin because, the car broke down. So, really thinking about my work centers on thinking about I am this fucking powerhouse. And whatever it is that I can imagine, whatever it is that I want to do, I hold the keys to that. And of course, there are hurdles that may stand in our way. There may be doors that aren't open. And if we really go into this piece around satisfaction, those doors don't have to be open right now. But in my mind, what I can do is I can say, but they will open, right? Your no, I mean, it's typical sales, right? Like your no is just a not right now. I don't internalize that no. It will eventually be a yes. And I think because we often put these things outside of us, we give ourselves these long timelines to complete these things. If I just do this, then I'll be satisfied. But if I'm already satisfied, I don't give a fuck what you do because I'm going to make this happen because I'm going to find alternative routes. I don't necessarily have to go this way. I can reverse engineer whatever it is that I want to create in my life. But you have to be willing to give yourself over to change. And the way you give yourself over to change is by releasing resistance to it.
That is so helpful. Thank you. Because even with my work, it's like safety, 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 of course. And sometimes, the deal, it could be a block because it's like, well, I don't feel that. It's like you said, there's always going to be something. The car's always going to break down. There's always going to be something where we could be like, well, then forget it. I don't feel safe then. And so I am so grateful that you voiced, okay, how can we have a relationship, almost like creating safety in our body or creating this satisfaction in our body, so we don't feel like we have to always, of course, we need our basic needs met and, basic safety. But I love that you're taking away some of the chaos around it. Because I know sometimes for me, I'll be like, it needs to be perfectly safe, perfectly safe, perfectly safe. And it gets us a little bit in a tailspin. So thank you for voicing that. I have so many questions that I want to follow up with that. So we'll start with the satisfaction piece. Like, how the hell if someone like help, like if someone is so 101 to this work, or even if they're seasoned, if they are totally I like what you were saying, like kind of on like the auto, I would say auto too, that's not the right word, but like the doing the same thing, eating the turkey sandwich. I always say eating the turkey sandwich on a Tuesday and you go grocery shopping on a Wednesday, like the same old thing. When someone's so wired for that, how do you help them then pivot and create aliveness and satisfaction in their body?
It's about getting proximate, getting close to your body. More oftentimes than not, we have holding patterns that we are so unaware of, and they can be contextually and situationally dependent. So when we walk into work, we may curve our shoulders, we may put our heads down, right? Like all of these things that we may not necessarily be cognizant of in the moment. They're almost to some degree unconscious, but they're signaled by the context. And so my thought, the easiest way of doing this is to get in your body. So,
Right.
but it's not how is my body feeling right now? It's like, what's going on in my jaw? Here's another big one, right? Is my asshole clenched? I said it, I meant it.
I
Right?
love it.
Because
Yes.
and your glutes too. The fact of the matter for many of us, our idea of control first comes through our bodily functions, right? So if it's not what we put in our mouths, it becomes how we eliminate from our bodies. And so if we are thinking about, for the next few minutes, you can set a timer on your phone, right? Like once every 2 hours or 4 hours, whatever it is, check in with fill in the blank. So if it's your jaw, if it's your shoulders, if it's your scalp, your palms, the soles of your feet, it's just one piece. And here's the beauty of it. Here's the ultimate beauty of it. When you are thinking about, okay, so is my asshole clenched? Are my glutes clenched? Let me relax them. And I'm going to stay in this space for 30 seconds. And so now you're here and it's like, oh, more oftentimes what we do is we find it delightful, right? It's like, oh, I didn't know I was carrying so much. So now we start to have this internal dialogue. And because it feels good, when that alarm comes the next time, it's like, oh, I don't mind doing this because this is enjoyable. It gives me a reprieve. It's kind of a love-hate relationship that I think people have with meditation. We all love the benefits of meditation, but how do you establish that habit? How do you carve out however much time you're going to spend with meditation? This is the touch and you move away, touch and move away. But you also have to make the commitment. I would tell anyone to build from, if you can't do 30, do 10 seconds. If you can't do 10 seconds, hell, do 5. But what you want to do is you want to get to the point where you are monitoring, noticing inside your body for 2 minutes at a time. And if you really want to make it powerful, do it when you wake up, before you get out of bed. What does it feel like to release resistance in my body? Now, what are you going to leverage in your day? How are you going to embrace the day as it comes to you when you started the day releasing resistance and understanding that everything I need, for the most part, is in my body? And even if I don't have the things that I need, my brain is here. And the brain is not something that is independent from the organism. It's a part of your physical organism. So then you use your brain to get the things that you need in order to fulfill those lower levels of Maslow's hierarchy, to make sure your basic needs are met, and to do all you can do to create safety, both physical and psychological safety for yourself. And then that allows us to think about where we belong, how we create community, how we love, and how we receive love. And then finally, right, am I competent? Am I capable? And that confidence piece. So when you've got that marriage, now you are able to walk out into the world and say, bring it on. And your point of attraction no longer becomes when I get the thing, it is I am my best point of attraction. And these things will fucking come to me because I am that fucking powerful.
Oh, goodbye. Mic drop. It's done. It's over. And we're done. That is, I have so much to say on this. But I'm really grateful that you're bringing this up because it's funny, when I first started this, doing more of the spiritual work, I was more in tune with that, like with that principle. Like we'll talk about like manifesting, if you will. Like I am the powerhouse. Like I am the energy. I am the vibe. Not from a shady way where I'm like, I'm going to make myself wrong if I have a bad day. But like I was so in tune with that. And then I pivoted a little bit, and it's okay. But I picked up some sticky stuff, which I think I needed to let go of, like, desires, which God bless, desires. But I think I approached it in a way where it took me out of my body. Does that make sense? Like it took me out where it was like, it started from a good place of like desires, attract those things. But then it was like, became about those things, like sneakily. Like it kind of got away from me. I'm like, oh, no, yes.
It's the deficit, right? So
Yes.
Sometimes what we think about in terms of desire is I want, right? And that can be so juicy and it can be so lovely and delicious, and you can luxuriate in all of the things that you want. And then there's a tipping point where that desire, that want becomes a deficit, right? I want this thing, I don't have it. I want this thing, I don't have it. I want this thing, I don't have it. And that shift is I want that thing, and I'm going to release resistance to it. Right.
Yes.
I'm just going to think about it in terms of, you can almost let it go, right? For as much as you can, to think about it. I'm a fucking powerhouse. I'm amazing. Right. Whatever. I'm a badass, right? Like I'm going to have all of the things that I want. No one is going to stop me from doing that. I just don't know the timeline. And if it comes up, oh, I don't have this, let me release resistance to time, because time is really an artificial construct. I mean, it really does exist, right? There's a day, there's a night. We're all like these gray hairs on my head. But if we can relax, I don't have to have it today. And how much better will it be if it comes tomorrow, or the tomorrow after tomorrow, or the tomorrow after tomorrow? So now we can release that deficit. It's not that I don't have it, it's just a matter of time. So how can I get in my body, release this resistance? Where am I holding it? And are there prior patterns that I have in my body? What other prior experiences have I had that keep me locked, or that can liberate me in my experience of right now?
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. It's so helpful. It's so helpful because I think there's a few things. You took the toxicity out of the manifesting. Like we see some of the manifesting, it's a little like, this is a little crunchy. Like it's a little bit like you have to be perfect. You have to be high vibe. You have to only eat kale. You have to be shitting rainbows and butterflies, which it's like that. No one wants to dance that day. I mean, sometimes I've been attracted to it, but that's not fucking sustainable. You know what I mean? Like that, no one wants to dance that dance. You have had such, and you're teaching us such a healthy relationship to it of, let's strip some of that like dogma and that thing, those beliefs that aren't serving us, and like, let's get back to I'm a fucking powerhouse, and let's get back to that satisfaction within. That is so helpful. So let me ask you, like, logistics, nuts and bolts. How does one chase? Is it like, for you, is it chasing's the wrong word, but is it following the satisfaction beat to beat to beat? Like, how do you have longevity with finding satisfaction in your body?
A couple of things. I think, which hopefully will help to round out what I just said around manifestation, right? So
Yes.
thinking about this in terms of I'm releasing resistance to it all.
Mm,
So even if I'm in that deficit mode, I release resistance to the fact that I'm experiencing this. I know that it's not going to last forever. I give myself over because you do have to give yourself over to those feelings. Because to your point, if I'm going to say all rainbows and sunshine, it it materially flies in the face of what it means to live life. Because life will take out a baseball bat and get you in your knees every time, right?
yep.
And we've got this idea that if we've got the habits, then I can control what I can control. And then when life comes in, it's like I'm thrown all askew. So
Yes.
now I release resistance to the fact that life is going to do what life is going to do. And I have the ability to respond to that however I see fit. And with the idea that I'm releasing resistance to how I'm feeling, I'm also releasing resistance to my timeline. I feel the feelings, and then when it feels good, I get to process those feelings and move on to the next piece. So it stays right here. It is, I'm really disappointed, right? Like I wanted to gain 15 clients in a week, or I wanted to make $70 million in a day, whatever that is. I can feel the feelings around not meeting that deadline. And I can also tell myself, oh, but how much better will it be, right? When I'm here, right now. I'm
Yes.
disappointed that I don't have it, but what do I have? And what can I do with this moment? With the understanding that I'm going to go back to this. I am a fucking badass powerhouse. I'll just combine those things, right? I am a
Yeah.
fucking badass powerhouse. And if I am really releasing resistance to the moment, my point of attraction will shift. That shift in your point of attraction pulls different things to you. So now, if I'm in this really lovely place of satisfaction, still disappointed I haven't made $70 million in a day, right? So, but I'm okay. I'm satisfied in my person. Then someone randomly in the subway, on the bus, at the at the actual subway where you eat sandwiches, whatever, wherever in the world you are, at Jane's Odds and Ends, whatever. Whew, there's something about that person. And so now it's, hey, Erica, I want to have this conversation with you. And because you're a fucking badass powerhouse, you're like, hey, let's have this conversation. And then it becomes, so what do you do? Or there will be an entry point where it's like, let me tell you about what it is that I do, what I want, what I'm desiring. And this person may not necessarily be able to get you that thing, but they may know someone who can. Or people just want to give you shit, and it makes your experience of the world that much better. And when you're already satisfied, it goes back to that flourish and the flowerets or the flowers that are on top of the cake. It's like it, life gives you more to be satisfied about.
Oof, that is so good. That is so good. It's so helpful. It reminds me, I've been obsessed with this quote the last like 4 weeks. So so it kind of different flavor, but it resonates. And I'm like, oh, because I'm trying to really apply this to my life and hold this through with my clients is the quote. I'm going to absolutely butcher it, but it's the point of it, the cliff notes is getting to a place of having one foot in the door of desires, like knowing the desires, being active, like playing with them, great. But then also really being one foot in the door of being totally letting them go and jamming with what you have right now. And I'm like, oh my God, that is the secret sauce. Like, of course, like bring on, a party on a boat. Like let's bring on the party on the boat. And right here, I'm with June and we're jamming and we're having a great time. And I'm seeing her beauty and I'm rocking out with her. You know what I mean? So I think like that is just to, again, different flavor, but I think it's same vibe of holding what we want, getting really specific what we want, and being playful is the wrong word, but go with me on this, like playful enough to play and flow with what is present right here, right now.
If I use the play analogy, it reminds me of double dutch. The two ropes going at the same time. And so if you think about, if you've ever watched anybody jump double dutch, right? Like there's this anticipation where they're watching the ropes and they're preparing to get in, right? But there's no disappointment that they're not jumping right now. There's no disappointment around, oh my gosh, I could have taken that moment. I could have taken that moment. There's no thought about, why are they fucking turning the ropes this way, right? There is, I'm going to get my in. And there's anticipation. There's delicious anticipation in that. And then when you see your opening, you jump.
That's so good. Let me ask you, it sounds like, I'll ask you this because I have so many things I want to ask you, but I just feel like we have to hit it. Like, it sounds like you have a good relationship to trust, right? It almost sounds like you have a really good relationship to trust and surrendering. So like, what does that look like for you in your life? How do you advise people to get closer to that? Because we could say, all these things all day and people might be like, oh, I don't believe it is going to come in perfect timing. I like, there's a fear of surrendering. It's like, let me go out and do all 4,005 things because I don't believe it actually will come. So like, what is your relationship to trust, believing, surrendering? I know obviously we have to do the action steps, but like, how do you play within making that a reality for you?
It hasn't always been that way, right? And I think I've cycled in and out of it, not really knowing what I was doing until my mom was diagnosed with dementia. So I ended up choosing, right, to move home to help aid in caring for her. And, I had this amazing job in New York City on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. I was living in Brooklyn. Like I was really living my best life. And then everything came to a screeching halt. And I remember leaving my job, moving back home to a house that I hadn't lived in permanently since I was 18. And by this time I was 40. And so, this long time that I'd been away. And I remember it was not July, it was May. And I woke up and I was like, is this all there is? And it was the entire month of May. Is this all there is? Like, why do people live? And there wasn't this desire, right, in terms of ending my life. There was just an apathy. And I made the choice. It was like, so if life isn't presenting you with anything to invest in, then figure it out. Choose what you want to invest in and go in that direction. Because oftentimes the absence of a choice, like if there isn't a choice in front of us, then we have the opportunity to self-lead. And so my desire was, I did so many things. I started working out. And I think that's moving your body, however you can move your body in ways that feel good to you. If it's blinking on purpose, whatever it is, it releases these neurotransmitters and these endorphins in your body that help boost mood. So I did that. One of the things that I think that we don't necessarily focus on is that 95% of the body's serotonin is produced in the gut.
Oof.
So how is your gut doing? Right. And
Yeah.
so I'm not espousing diet, right? Like that's not where I'm dieting. I'm not espousing any of that. But I do think that there is something to be said for how we are digesting food, how we're moving through food through our bodies, and what we personally, us, not necessarily what society does, what we think about the food that we're consuming. And so if you are enjoying the food that you're consuming, then your experience of life is going to be more pleasurable. Why? Because of the serotonin in the gut. There's that mind
Yes.
body connection. And so if I think the food that I'm consuming is shit, if that's my thought about it as it's going in my mouth, then my body's going to respond to it like it's shit. So I feel like I'm like all the way what is it? Over the river and through the woods to grandmother's house. We're getting there. So
I'm this is part of the conversation. I'm obsessed with it. So dance with it. We're dancing. We like it.
awesome. And so I made a choice. And one of the things, it took me a while to come to satisfaction. But when I started, I have a satisfaction practice that I do every morning. And part of that, there are three pieces to it, right? So, what am I satisfied with, right? Like, what's bringing me satisfaction? What's feeling good? And then, what am I completely satisfied with? And what I mean by that is, how am I signaling to the greater consciousness, I don't want any more of this? I am completely satisfied with working a job I don't love. I am completely satisfied with not in with engaging tough as nails clients, right? I want people who can be coachable and teachable. So thinking about all of these things that we are completely satisfied with, but it's not oh my gosh, get this out of my life. It's, I'm full. And so now we're releasing resistance to the fact that it still exists, with the knowledge that it can potentially change at any moment. And also saying, because I think sometimes we get in those habits of, I hate this thing, I hate this thing, I hate this thing, I hate this thing. This thing is going to give you something to hate because you've established habituation around it, which then feeds that control monster. So when you can release and just say, okay, I'm satisfied with this. And then the last piece is, what'll satisfy me? What do I want? Right? If I have this thing, this will be satisfying to me. So now what we've done is what past, present, future with regard to how we understand satisfaction. And then I just get present in my body. I spend at least, and this I think is the beauty of it, on the days where I have the luxury of time, I'm there for 30, 45 minutes. On the days where I'm like, fuck this shit, I don't really want to do satisfaction in my body, but I know it's helpful. 2 minutes. It's 2 minutes. And so now, and the cool thing about it is that those 2 minutes of helping me to really process what's going on in my body, and especially these touch points. Or if you're in bed, one of my favorite things to do is, if you've got skin in the bed, right? If you're not completely covered, I'll run my legs or my hands over the sheets, right? I'll pull the sheet down a little bit to feel what the temperature in the room feels like. So now I am in touch with the fact that I am a living thing, human person, and I'm loving this moment, and then this moment, and then this moment for at least 2 minutes up until I'm ready to get up. And so now, in my mind, that's a piece of surrender for me. So now I've surrendered to the moment. I've allowed myself, I've oriented my body, my emotional landscape, and also my brain, right? I have oriented and aligned these things. And so now what does it look like to move through my day? I can guarantee you, on the days where I'm like, I don't want to fucking do this, those 2 minutes, it's completely impacted. Because if I don't do it, I am more concerned about not doing it than I am about how long I do it for. And that's been a through thread for all of my clients. I had a client who has chronic illness, and we got into, what does it feel like to feel satisfied, even when you're in pain, right? What's the quality of your pain? Can you describe it? And my client said, one of the things that came up was that she didn't consider herself an alcoholic by any stretch of the imagination, but she said that in her pain, she reached for alcohol and she didn't know it until she had started this process of getting in her body and recognizing, right, just because we're in pain doesn't mean that we can't release resistance to this moment. So I'm in pain, I've got a headache, whatever is hurting in the body, thinking through, so what is the quality of this pain? Is there any place in my body where there's a reprieve? My shoulder, right? My kneecap. Am I feeling anything in my hamstrings? And so it's really being able to almost body scan and to recognize this is my experience of right now. And I think this is the setup. For many of us, it's like, this is how I'm feeling in my body. If I could just feel something different, but this is what I'm feeling in my body. And this human experience is so amazing and it's so glorious. We are all fucking master manifestors because we're all here. And so if I can tap into that master manifester um, energy, then I can be in this moment right here, right now, even with discomfort, even in pain. So it's really that surrender is focusing, giving myself time to focus on what is and to be okay with it.
Oh my God, that is so, you said so many things that I really want to frame quickly, and I'll go through them quickly because I'm like, oh my gosh, you're so good. I have so many questions. So the first one is, I love what you said about having a choice. Because I remember in the spiritual community, if you will, or whatever, self-help improvement community, people be like, just choose, just choose, just choose. And I would be so fucking triggered. I'd be like, fuck you. Like, I'm not just choosing. So thank you for taking away the weirdness and the charge around that, first and foremost. Like, thank you for framing that in a beautiful way. And I also wanted to frame, and love up on you of how you explain surrender. Cause I think it's like a hot topic we talk about, like surrender, trust, surrender, trust, surrender, trust. And you just gave us like, it's not easy when you practice it, but like a digestible way, not like surrender, quit all your jobs. And that it doesn't have to be that aggressive. Like, I love that you're like, I'm just going to be in bed. And instead of rushing up and popping up and not being my body and blah, 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 like you were like, okay, I'm going to feel, on my clavicle, that's clavicle, right?
Yes.
I'm like, maybe I'm making up a part of my body. But like, I'm gonna feel this here. I'm gonna feel my foot on that. To me is such a more digestible, approachable, way to do surrender versus like quit it all and, meditate in Tibet. Like that feels very fucking overwhelming. So thank you for that. And I want to talk, because this is such a huge part of you and we're on it, talking about like being the magic, like instead of like trying to grab the magic, like being the magic. And I'm like, wait. I want to talk about being the magic, but I also want to talk about the underbelly because we got to talk about the underbelly. And you touched upon it, pain. I'd love to talk more about that, but can you also talk, because I know this is a huge component of your work, working through this is like, how can biases affect, like come in like a freight train and stop the work of satisfaction, stop the work of living our best life. Like, can you talk to, because we have to talk about that piece. So can you talk about how that affects all of this work?
Sure. I'll say that I do think that there's systematic exclusion. And we can't have this conversation if we're not talking about how systems conspire to block and distance some people based upon identity from power and privilege, right? So that's top of mind. And there is the perception of how I'm perceiving how you're perceiving me based upon the identities that we hold. And so then it's hard for me to release resistance when I've imagined you as resistant because of the identities that you hold. And so I'm already modifying my behavior, which takes me out of my body, right? So now I'm in a protective stance. And for many of us, it's how we live our lives. And for some of us, it's how we have to live our lives. Um, because, I think about Black trans women and the rate at which they are killed and murdered, right? Like that's something that we all need to be engaging around in terms of our collective humanity and how are we viewing each other. That's a conversation that we have to have. And I will say, right, like even here, even when I'm working with clients, before I got to the point where I could say, okay, we're different. What does that mean for our relationship? And so to be able to have those conversations, because here's the deal. No one's going to get it right because there isn't really a right. The way that we're engaging, the way that we understand our identities, more oftentimes than not has been handed to us. We inherit it. And because we inherit those identities, we're also inheriting people's perceptions of our identities. And so one of the things that we have to get really clear on is how much of this is mine? How much of this is my perception? And how comfortable do I feel with engaging from that phenomenal badass space that's within me and allowing people to prove to me that they're assholes? I shouldn't say prove because that's a preconceived notion, right? But if you're going to be an asshole, I'm going to assume that you're going to meet me from your phenomenal badass self. And if you don't, right, part of the satisfaction piece is that then my satisfaction buzzer goes off. And I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't feel good to me. And if we're really careful about how we're developing this process, then it becomes a practice. You've crossed a boundary. My satisfaction is my total goal. I don't feel satisfied. What in me is blocking satisfaction? Is it my perception of how you're perceiving me, or are you just being an asshole? And if you're just being an asshole, then I get to engage my boundaries, which makes me more of a phenomenal badass and will help you move into that phenomenal badass space if you so choose. But I don't have any responsibility for that. And the last piece is that I think it's important, right? When we're talking about jobs or employment, when we're talking about difficult romantic partner relationships, that those perceptions can have deleterious impact, right? You can lose a job, you can be harmed physically, emotionally, or mentally by a partner, like all of these things. There are consequences, of course. I'm not saying that all you have to do is release resistance to being hit and you'll be satisfied. That I'm clear. And when we start to leverage satisfaction in our bodies, it does help us to recognize, so what are my boundaries? Are these boundaries being crossed? It's a step-by-step process. It is never it's never a one and done. And I think we've done such a disservice to how we understand our biases by saying, if I know these things, if I say these things, then I'll be right. But there is no right. You're going to mess up. You're going to get it wrong. Hell, I was a DEI expert. And, well, I would say I still am. And I mess up all the time. It's a part of our human relationship. But one thing that I do know is based upon my practice, based upon how I live my life, and watching what's happened for my clients, people's energy shifts. It's like a flower, right? So if you've got a patch of land with flowers on it, when one flower opens, it signals for the rest of the flowers around it, time to open up. But it's not just the sun. It is the intuitive process that comes, that's among plant life, right? That says, oh, you bloomed? Oh, pollen? Time for me to open up. And so that's the deliciousness, the luxury of satisfaction, is that it also pulls people, hopefully, into their better selves. It allows their flower to bloom, because I'm not taking anything away from your flower if I bloom. We are both beautiful in our own respective ways. But I'd love it if you could bloom with me.
That is so helpful. It's funny. I think I don't remember where it was. Life gets wild, so I don't remember where it was, but I remember it was in conversation about this work. Again, a little bit of a different shade, a different flavor. But the pleasure work, people were like, "Why are you so obsessed with it?" And I'm like, "Let me tell you all the reason." And this and good for your health and the whole thing. And I said, this is gonna seem crazy. You're not gonna believe me, but one of the reasons why I'm so obsessed with this was when I was deep. Now I've, had to, and I'm sure you had to have this with satisfaction. When we've probably, when I know for me, for pleasure, when I first was immersed in this, it was like, wow. And now it's like, okay, that was years ago. What is the new flavor? What is the new beat and relationship to this? But when I was first immersed in that work, I remember, and still, it is when I am tapped into that work, it is the most integrous version of me. I am just because I am so in tune with this doesn't feel good or this feels good. So I know what my boundaries are. I know. And when I'm in my head and like when I'm ripped out of my body and on panic mode, I don't feel the things that feel out of alignment. I'm just like, oh, I guess, or I'm too busy to even say, like, who cares? Like, things so easily fly by the wayside. Like I don't notice them as much. But when I was doing the pleasure work, it sounds so wild. And I'm saying this because it sounds like it was the same for you with satisfaction. Us really doing this work, it is like the most deeply integrated but integrous version of us with the most utmost integrity, because we can tell like this is a yes for me, this is a no, or like this is a yes and you feel safe, I'm gonna invite you in on my boundaries. And what are your boundaries? Like it shocks people that they're like, you got that from the pleasure work? And it's like, yes. So thank you for explaining that about the satisfaction work, that, because I know sometimes why I'm highlighting this is I know sometimes people become resistant and they're like, that guys, that's nice that you're having a conversation about satisfaction, but I have to pay my, like, that's fun. That's cute. That's cute. But we're like, wait, this will help you with all of that. Yes. I feel like you have things to say. Tell me.
Yes, I think this is the beautiful cross function, cross hatching between pleasure and satisfaction, right? Releasing resistance and pleasure. So, what does it look like to embody pleasure, to allow yourself to experience pleasure, and then invite the naysayer in? Watch me experience pleasure, frustration, anger, um, fear, right? I want you to watch me embody this pleasure and really enjoy the sensory experience of being in the moment. So the naysayer gets to come along. The naysayer isn't wrong, right? Even with bias, right? All of these things are designed to keep us safe. They are not inherently bad. They are
Yes.
super awesome. However, and I know you know this with the pleasure work too, right? It's almost like people are like, but I'm going to deny myself. I'm not, for whatever reason, I'm not worthy. I don't deserve it, right? I'm not going to allow myself to be satisfied because I need this thing. Because what else am I working for? But what if you're just an amazing human being, clearly a master manifester because you're here and you just let the moment be? And so you don't have to do that in the face of intense fear, or when you're at work, or when you're with perhaps an abusive partner. But what does it look like in the moments when you wake up? If not the moments that you wake up, when you go to the bathroom. If not when you go to the bathroom, on the walk between your car to the front of whatever store that you're going to, or from public transit, right, to wherever it is that you're going. Can you take those few moments to just release resistance? If you are moving your body in a way that feels good to you, can you determine what's the seat of that good feeling, right? Like, where is this originating from? Is it my gut? Is it my belly button? Is it my lungs? Is it that space between my heart and my back body, which people typically call the soul, the seat of the soul? Is it my fucking armpit? But giving yourself over to the fact that you get to be satisfied, even if it's just from the front of the grocery store back to wherever it is that's going to carry you where you're going. What does it look like to walk to the front door of the house and just say, you know what? I'm going to release resistance. I'm going to notice what's happening in my body. And dare I say, I might enjoy the process of whatever it is that I'm doing. And whatever's in the ether, watch me fucking enjoy my life for this finite period of time until it becomes infinite.
Oh, that is so, it's so much more fun. That's such a more fun option.
I agree
That's such,
wholeheartedly.
oh my God. I'm like, that's such a more, and you know what's funny? It really takes it not from a bad or, deprived place, but it takes our creativity, because we say like, but I'd rather be on a boat. It's like, well, that's not necessarily. You might be on a boat and still be Ms. You know what I mean? Like it takes creativity in the moment. I love that you led us to the five senses. Like, okay, if I really, there's so many opportunities for us to be like, this is where I am right now. How can I play with this? How can I create magic? And it's funny, I have a client and she's picked up what I've been putting down, and her whole thing is, I don't want to be a muggle anymore. I don't want to be a muggle anymore. So we laugh, and she was saying like, I'm having muggle moments. I'm having muggle moments. And what she means by that is, and that's okay that you've had muggle moments, but she's kind of really, how do I say this? Jammed out in like not a good jammed out with like what is, and this sucks, and this should be this, and I should be here, and this should be it. So our thing is, okay, let's get to the muggle moments, which this is a situation. I know I want to go here. We're going to keep creating to get to that spot, but in the moment, this is what I see in front of me. This is what I feel. This is what I smell. How can we, like witches, wizards, non-binary, fabulous, magical beings, how can we create magic with what we got right here? And that's so good. And I have to ask this before we wrap too, is you're killing it with the body game. Like we're in our bodies, we're all the good things, all the good things. But you also have a badass relationship to mindset, because it's like, yes, I feel this in my body, but it sounds like you snap back pretty frequently of like, come back, come back, come back. Like you're magical. Cause you know the deal. It's like we get ripped off, but we get ripped away from these thoughts. So you sound like you're really good at come back, you're magical, you're badass, you're a rock star, come back, come back. Can you talk to us about, if someone is new to this or if they're seasoned, how the hell do you cultivate both? And what does that look like for you?
I don't think that somatic coaches can do the work without mindset. So it's this idea, but I think that mindset coaches do it all the time, right? Like it's this idea,
Yes.
I'm going to focus, we're just going to deal with your mindset. And it reminds me a lot of diet culture, and how people are like, if you focus on this diet for however long, you'll shed this much weight. When you shed this much weight, you're done. And we don't really have the words, the conversation. We don't do the mindset shift to say, one, what does it mean to be in a different body if we have a smaller body or a bigger body? Like, we don't talk about that. And then what does it mean to maintain this body right now? And that's mindset. And so I can lead your mind to water. That's great. But if I'm thirsty, that doesn't help my that doesn't help my organism, right? So it has to be a both and. And I would argue that a lot of the folks that do the mindset stuff, it's deeply important. And there's also the marriage of the body, because our bodies have muscle memory. It's the idea, and I think many of us know these stories of people who have received transplants, organ transplants. And then, someone who receives a heart transplant was a really healthy eater. And then all of a sudden they're craving like French fries and cheeseburgers. And that's not who they were before. The reason is because our bodies have memory of our joys and our traumas. And so if we're not in conversation, if our minds and our bodies and our emotions, I have to tack that on, if the way we think, the way we're feeling, and what we're actually physically experiencing, if those things don't align, any one of those that isn't attended to will throw off the whole game plan. So I think it's imperative that we start thinking about And I think that somatic coaches are a very necessary function. Ha, if I just say so myself. But I also think that there are really accessible ways that people can change the game, change their mindset game for themselves, right? So as you're going through these mindset shifts, what does it mean in your body to maintain this? What's coming up in your body? If your mindset coach is telling you, oh, shift this, we're going to do these things, and you start shifting, take some time to notice what comes up in your body. Oh, my shoulder hurts. When was the last time I remembered this shoulder pain? Oh, yeah, I remember the first time I got it. It was that bad breakup at college. And so now you've got a few choices, right? So if you're not working with a somatic coach, take it to your mindset coach. I think that these things are connected. How can I shift so that I'm living my best life and I can process what's in my body? And the cool thing about it is it gets to be there. I think I love massage. I used to be a massage therapist, but I think for many of us, it's this idea that if I touch, if I feel, it's getting worked out. It needs to be worked out. And our body has this intuitive, ancient wisdom. So if we just sit with it, if we just notice, I think, that goes back to the experience of pain or discomfort or fear. If we just sit with it, it's not right. And it certainly isn't wrong. It just is. Then the body starts to unravel itself.
Yeah, that's so helpful. It's funny too, it's like we have to note that like mindset coaches are hot in some ways are hotter, are hot ticket items compared to sometimes somatic coaching. Unless I'll say this is I see a lot of clients and I talk to a lot of people, they're attracted to the somatic work because they think, oh, I'll be so hot. Like they'll have I'll have the physical, I'll really be in my body. So it's just funny that because it's a culture we live in that glamorizes, one piece. I'm really grateful that you are bringing up the body piece and the mindset piece. Quite honestly, like, yes, we think a lot, but we're not really taught to think in a positive way. Like, yes, we're taught to think, overthink, but we're not taught to have a healthy relationship with our mind.
Well,
and our bodies. Yeah.
Right. Because we're told, I think society gives us this message that you don't pay attention to your body until it's hurting or ill. So you either have to be sick or you have to experience pain to pay attention. And I would offer a counter thought, which is what if you're just with your body all the time? Because the interesting thing about pain for I think many of us is that it's like, oh, it just happened. More oftentimes than not, that's not true. Right now, if you've got a gunshot, a stab wound, if you stub your toe, immediate, yes. But things like muscle aches, that just doesn't come, right? Like, and I'm talking about chronic pain, not necessarily I worked out really hard. That's developing over time. And oftentimes because we're not sitting with our bodies, we're not paying attention to our bodies. It's the last thing that we attend to. Think about what the last time you washed your body. You hit the highs and lows and you got to go, right? Like we're on this hamster wheel. Well, when was the last time you luxuriated in a bath or in a shower, right? Like, oh my goodness, what like to feel the soap or the washcloth or however it is that you wash your body on my armpit or in the back of my knee or behind my ears. And the last piece I'll say is that more oftentimes than not, we don't allow ourselves to feel good unless we're in the presence of a partner or it's for the benefit of a partner. And we get to luxuriate in our pleasure and to be satisfied with that pleasure without the imposition of another person or being.
You cultivated that sentence perfectly, because I think the whole thing is people are like, yeah, but I do have a relationship to pleasure. And then when we boil it down, it's like, oh, if it's not even performative, but sometimes performative or in the presence of another. And so thank you for giving that big old permission slip of like, no, you could have it anytime. It could be at the DMV, it could be in the bath. Like, thank you for writing all of us. And I hope everyone energetically feels that that was a big, big permission slip. I want to wrap with obviously because you're fantastic. So I want to find, where people can go to you and find you and be in your circle. But before we do, and this might be a no answer, but I'm curious, is there anything, because there's so much more. I'm like, I have so much more to ask you and talk to you about. But is there anything else that you're like, Erica, I really want the listeners to have this? Like, is there anything else that you really feel, there might be a no, but is there anything else that you feel really called to speak about before we transition?
Yeah, the one thing that I'll say is that, and I don't know where this comes from, and I don't think the point of origin is important, but we've got this idea of one and done, right? So if I'm satisfied once, if I pleasure myself once, right, like that's our completion box checked. And what I would love for people to recognize is that life is a journey, and this is a process. It ebbs and flows, it grows, it expands, it contracts. And so never really focusing on the outcome, shift from outcome to process. So how am I engaging life? Not what is life giving me? And that goes back to the earlier point where you were talking about this idea of manifestation, right? Like, I know I've done it when I can see it. No, that's not true. You trust yourself and you know you've done it when it's in here first.
Yes.
Because if I know it here, if I trust this corporal being, if I trust this biological organism to the best of my ability, then what's happening on the outside will reflect what's happening on the inside. So it's the process.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. That's so helpful. Oh my God, I'm obsessed with you. I'm like, there's so many good one-liners from this. So thank you.
Sure.
That's so helpful. Thank you. And I want to highlight frame before we go and before we transition to where people can find you is, again, because I'm like, wait, before there's such a good one is, again, how we talked about you only have to eat kale. You only eat kale. You only have positive thoughts. You talked to us today, which was so helpful. I'm like already giving a recap, but like that you can have both the underbelly. Like you can have the pain. You can be with the chronic illness. You can have that. And you also can be a quote unquote powerful manifester. So thank you for taking away age old stories and conditioning around quote unquote manifesting that you have to, again, be rainbows and butterflies. It's only good vibes only. Ugh, it's so toxic, but it's not good vibes only. Like, thank you for holding a full human that, yes, can feel deep satisfaction and also can feel pain. So just wanted to frame that because that is so helpful. And before we wrap, where can people find you? Tell us how we can be in your community.
Awesome. Yes. So I am the Dr. June on Instagram, and you can find me on Facebook. My profile is public. It's June Christian. And I also have a group on Facebook called The Liberated Leader, and thinking about liberation as the releasing of resistance, of satisfaction, of pleasure, of play, of all of these really wonderful things that we get to experience because we are here. And leader, because we're all self-led, all of us, regardless of whether we relinquish our control of life, our experience of life to someone else, that is still self-leadership. So be Dr. June on Instagram, June Christian on Facebook, and The Liberated Leader is my Facebook group. And I'm also June Christian PhD on LinkedIn if you want to professional schmooze.
Yes. Well, I literally cannot thank you enough. You are a joy. And, if anything resonated with anyone in this conversation, definitely check out June. As you could tell, she's an amazing human. We definitely want to get into her space. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I so appreciate that you came on today.
Thanks, Erica. I really appreciate it. And if there's a homework, because that's the educator. And
oh, yes, please. I love a homework.
Last piece, allow yourself, it's a little racy, to pleasure yourself, and then invite your naysayer to be present in the experience of that pleasure and see what happens.
Oh, dropping all the truth bombs right before we go. Thank you, June. I appreciate you. thank you. Seriously, thank you so much for joining me on today's episode and on this podcast journey. And if you loved what we talked about today and you know another human who could definitely benefit from what was discussed, I would so appreciate if you would go ahead and share this podcast with them. Don't forget, hit subscribe or follow so you never ever miss an episode. And the great news is you can always follow me, my work, my blog, my podcast on my website at www.wethelight.org. And hey, remember, life is so much brighter when we shine. I'll see you next time.